I'm Mary Starr. This is a Wake to Truth podcast. We are delighted to have back again as our guest today, Joel Maldonado. Many of you who follow us have seen him. He has an incredible career. He was a Border Patrol agent for 28 years. One of the things that he did while working for them was actually teaching constitutional law. So if anyone knows immigration law, it's Joel. He also, post-retirement, wrote a book called The Binding Oath.
The Binding Oath.
Yep. I love that title. And that came from your oath that you took as you entered the Border Patrol agency.
Mm-hmm.
The Binding Oath, a Border Patrol
journey and the Mayorkas effect.
Yes.
Because that's what it's all about, is the journey, So and then the journey's troll. Every journey has a nemesis, and Mayorkas is one of the biggest nemesis that the immigration system has. So that's why his name graces the title of my book.
Yes, well said. We're going to talk about visas today. That's a hot topic that's been in the news. In addition to the H1B that we've all been hearing about, there's also an H2B and there's an H2A. So, Joel, I would like you to start with just a foundational explanation of what is the difference between them and what are their different purposes.
Okay. I'll be glad to, Mary. But first, I just want to thank you again for having me on. As you know, as your listeners will know, H1B is on the forefront lately because Trump put it on there, I guess. He's been touting more of those visas, which has, in essence, divided the right. It's even the MAGA right. It's divided those people because some people are for it, some people are against it. I consider myself to be a border hawk, so I'm very a staunch conservative in that regard. But I'm gonna fairly explain both sides, the pros, the cons, the differences in the visas, their purpose, the law behind it. So I hope your listener is going to be very educated by the end of our show here. But please understand that that I'm going to try to be as neutral as possible, although my inclinations will come out nonetheless. But okay, let's discuss the differences, and let's start with the H1B, since that's on the news here lately. The H1B is best known as the skilled workers. These are your scientific researchers. These are your computer programmers. These are, scientists and very, very skilled. You have to have a college degree. You have to be a member of the STEM programs, the sciences and all these things. These are very important things. And one of the big defining differences between this one, the H1B, and the other one, besides the fact that you have to be skilled, is also that it's a 3-year visa. And those 3 years can be extended for another 3 years for a total of 6 years. Many of them are here on student visas already. I'm going to give both sides, all right? So
please do.
Let's say you have a very intelligent individual who happens to be from India or from any other country that you want to put out there, okay? But let's just say India, or there's a very intelligent individual. He's graduating magna cum laude, and he is very, very intelligent and has the experience. Because many times, if you don't have the college degree, you can have experience or knowledge in the thing. But mainly, you need that degree in there. And many of these are going to be getting their doctorate or masters. They're very intelligent people. And they are the cream of the crop from their country, or maybe not even. But here in our country, they happen to be the cream of the crop. And they're just head and shoulders over some of our very own students. So here's something that you should consider. do you want to get rid of that guy after he finishes his college degree and send him back to India and let India benefit? Or do we want to keep them around and say, hey, this is a very intelligent person and he's going to do great things for our country. He's going to research and I'm telling you, he'll do better stuff than the people that invented the vaccine at Pfizer, you know? So that's the question that we have. Do we have that kind of talent? Do we want to get rid of him or her? Or do we want to keep them and keep them around to research here in our country and do good for our country? So that's just one of the arguments that you could use for the ones that are pro H1B. Now, the argument against it would be for, like, for example, my son. I can give experience in this. And my son is about to graduate from Texas Tech University. Guns up, he is going to major in engineering, computer engineering. My personal problem would be, and caution in this, although I can see the valid point that people bring up about great minds and keeping them in this country. But my son, who is graduating from Texas Tech and is going to be, he's a bright mind, but by his own admission, he doesn't have the experience that some of these guys from India have and can bring to the table. So my question is, will my son be displaced because of all of these people from India, from China, from wherever, Indonesia, that are very bright minds? Would they displace people like my son who worked very hard, is ahead of the game and work? He sacrificed a lot. Now, will he be displaced? That's number one. Now, even if my son has very good grades and he competes well with them, will he be displaced because, let's say, somebody from India, they could start him at $80,000 for an computer engineering job, compared to my son, who they would have to pay more or whatever. Let's just say that for an engineer starting, just to give a flat rate, 80,000. I'm just saying 80,000. I don't know what the starting wages are, but are they going to pay this guy $80,000 so they don't have to pay an American said amount? Does that make sense, Mary? So that's my concern. And that's a lot of Americans' concern that are against these H1B visas. So I went ahead and jumped into the pros and cons before explaining the others. However, the only reason I'm doing that is because H1Bs are in the forefront right now of the news cycle. So that's the thing, that we have a dilemma at hand. On one hand, hey, we want to make America great, and by importing these people and keeping them here, keeping great minds. But we gotta understand that it can come at a price if we don't do things right. Do you have any questions so far with the two things I brought up?
Okay, but you're saying in India or in Mexico, they're not going to be living in India or Mexico. Would they not, with that H1B moving to the U.S.? That's the whole point.
Well, that's a very good point. But here's the thing: a lot of them have one foot in their country, so they're only here. Remember, H1B, H2A, and H2B. Those are non-immigrant visas. Those are not permanent residents. Those are not. These are not green cards. These are non-immigrant visas, meaning that after a while they're going to go home to their country. So they're either sending money back home to take care of their family, or they're hoarding the money and saving it so when they do go back to their country, they'll live a good life. So that's the way it works, and that's the way it's engineered to work, to tell you the truth, because it's a non-immigrant visa. Now, if it's an immigrant visa, that's a whole different story. Now we're talking about they're coming in, they're working for so many years, and then they can change their status to a green card and live here longer. And
Right.
and
And that's
and then
not the point.
and then once they legalize, Mary, they're going to want more money. So they're not stupid. They know that they were paid wages that are below the others. And that's the problem that we get into with these non-immigrant visas, is that's why you hear a lot of people on the right saying, well, this is just corporate welfare, or this is slave labor. You hear those terms from even members of the right. They say this is slave labor because they're paying less than they should be paying, or would be paying to an American. And so that's the trouble we get into. Now, if they for sure want the very best for Pfizer, and they want a researcher that is going to do a good job and put out good products, and they want the best minds, and they're willing to pay the fair wages and stuff like that to whoever can do this kind of work, then but that it doesn't happen that way. You know it, and I know it. Now let's quickly go into, and please feel free to stop me, because I have a whole bunch of information that I'm just going to be kicking out there, Mary. And if you have a follow-up question, or you think your listener is going to want an explanation on something, please feel free to stop me. So
Okay.
these visas, and I already said they're non-immigrant visas, the H2A, the H1B, the H2B, those are non-immigrant visas. And you know why they were made in the first place? They were made to stop any gaps in the U.S. workforce. If there is a gap, or we cannot fill them, that is why they were created, derived from from the INA of the U.S. Constitution. They were created to help fill in the gaps in our workforce. And we have to be true to ourselves. Yeah, there are some gaps out there, but not always. We just don't want to pay the wages that it costs to get somebody to do that kind of job. Now, remember, the initial intent was to fill the gaps. And so if we're doing it for that purpose, to fill the gaps, if we truly cannot find a scientific researcher with that kind of talent within our ranks, within our people, then by all means, bring in bright minds. Now, even if their mentality is that, yes, we do have the gaps, but this guy is great, we want him here, then I'm okay with that, Mary, believe it or not. I want the best minds right here to stay right here, especially if we invest, their country invested in them and sending them over here, or their families had the means to send them over here to study in this country, and they benefited by our American universities. Then why not cherry pick them and keep them around? I'm all for that, especially if it's going to help us. But you better pay them the right wages so as to not displace and not use as a means to displace other people in our country. So as long as we're putting America first, be true to the MAGA movement. If we're putting America first, then let's invest in our students, and whenever we can, let's cherry pick from other countries, and I'm all for that. Now, before I proceed, let me just caution our side, because there are people on our side that are just against these visas just because they're against any kind of immigration. And then we have to be true to ourselves and say that, hey, if there is a gap in the U.S. workforce, we got to be able to bring in people. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you go overseas, Mary, and you meet the love of your life. Okay, you're studying overseas, and you find the love of your life, and you want to marry that person. Well, shouldn't people that go overseas, whether on the military or studying or visiting, and find the love of life, shouldn't they be able to bring them in as their spouse? And so there are K1, K2 visas where you can bring in people because you married them, and so that's a perfect example of legal immigration. And the H1, H2, those visas, those are also a legal avenue to bring in people to fill in the gaps in our workforce. So to argue otherwise, that no, there should be no immigration, then the conversation's over. I'm not talking to you, because you're either very naive, or you're just against people that are not like you. And I hate to use that word, but there are people on our side that feel that way. And you really can't carry conversations with those people. So let me just say that. But with that said, I am an immigration hawk, and I'm very strong about being America first and our people first. For example, let's get into the H-2A visas. The H-2A visas are the non-skilled workers, and specifically for ranching and farming.
Mhm.
And these are people that do very hard labor, that and you've heard it said that nobody wants to do. And
Right.
some people argue, well, if you pay fair wages, they will do it, possibly, but not enough. Not enough people to do it. For example, let's pick a vegetable, cucumbers. These crews that come in with H-2A visas, they come in for the express purpose of picking crops. That is the only reason they're coming in, is to pick crops. And they pick your jalapenos, your everything you can imagine has to be, whether it's oranges, whether they have to be picked to get to the market. And very few people want to do it at how they pay these people. They pay them, and they work very efficiently. And as a group, as a team, not very many people can do what they do. Now, you can pay, and believe it or not, by law, at least for H-2B visas, and I think it's the same for H-2A visas, the Department of Labor makes you pay, like, let's say for Texas, $16.50 an hour. You can't bring them in and say, of course they're going to do that job because they'll do it for $7 an hour. That's not true. They pay them. They should, by law, have to pay them $16.50. And for H-2A visas, which are, again, ranchers and farmers, you have to pay them. You have to not only pay them, but provide housing. And that housing, there's actually inspectors that come in and check the electricity, check the living conditions to make sure it's not some slum. So there's a lot required from these farmers and these ranchers. A lot is required of them, and because they want those crops to get to market, and so they can get their payday. It is really hard. So if anyone wants to go out there and pick cucumbers all day, I mean, and of course they have rules, actually. They can't exceed an 8-hour workday without being paid overtime and stuff like that. So if the Department of Labor is true to their word, and everybody is following by it, they're paying them fair wages and stuff. And even then, you don't get enough people volunteering. That's a perfect example, Mary, of a gap that needs to be filled. So they need to bring in these foreign workers to do this kind of work. And I get that. And then now, remember, that's only for agriculture. The H-2B is also unskilled labor, but it brings in other people. For example, like scrubs at hospitals, roofers, as you mentioned, and then, for example, landscapers, which is a branch um, uh, of agriculture. It's horticulture, but it's a branch of the agriculture department. And so those unskilled laborers, there's sometimes shortages, and they have a number on them per year. They have a limit. And the way you bring those H-2B B people in is through a lottery. And so you may end up on Group A, which you get right away in February, or you may end up in Group D or F, and your guys don't come in till after April. But the great thing about H-2As and H-2Bs is that it's seasonal. It's seasonal. which means that they come in, let's say, from February to August, and then once that season's done, they go home. Now let's talk about the pros and cons of if they're following the law. You have to pay them a certain amount. You have to provide housing for the H2As. For the H2Bs, I know for a fact you have to pay them $16.50 because my brother, who owns a company and brings in H2B visa workers, you have to pay them $16.50 at least. And my brother pays them $20 an hour, and because he wants to do right by them. And the difference is he doesn't have to provide housing. You know, they can go find an apartment or whatever. And it's also seasonal. They do their job. They pay taxes. There's the pros of it. They pay Social Security. They pay FICA. They pay all that stuff, which is win-win for Americans. Here's the one thing I do know about the H2B visas, Mary, is that my brother has to put an ad in the paper before he brings them in every season. He puts an ad in the paper for at least a month, and it's Americans first. And if any American or resident alien people that are here legally want a job, they can come apply. Usually we don't get any, or we get illegal aliens that show up, and my brother doesn't hire them. So he waits for his visa workers. But if an American that has the credentials, has the experience, and wants to work, he'll hire them. And those are great because they have driver's license and they have forklift certifications. So yeah, if Americans come first, they will get the job first. And that's the way it should be. That's the way this program is engineered to work. Now, you know, and I know that a lot of people will probably want to skirt, and then they risk being kicked out of this program. But another great thing about it is, like, if we're hiring more H2A and H2B of non-skilled labor, here's the benefits for Americans beyond the taxes being paid and everything. We also get people that know what they're doing because they have experience. They've been vetted. They've been checked for criminal records. They come in, and not only in landscaping, for example, my brother, to give an example, they come in and they know how to do the business of landscaping, but they also know they're masons. They have plumbing experience. So we're getting the cream of the crop of those people, and they come in very, very handy. So we use them quite frequently. But again, Americans come first. Any questions, Mary, up to this point?
No, you have done a great job explaining the difference between the three and the pros and cons, and you've been very fair about that. And that's exactly what we wanted to hear. And thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely. And another plus to it, though, Mary, what I was alluding to is that if we increase H2A and H2B visas when we need them, when there's a gap only, when Americans can't fill it in and we need to let's bring in those gaps so companies and corporations can hire legal people that pay taxes. Here's the problem when we don't have gaps being filled, is that illegal aliens come in and they will fill it in at $7 an hour, not pay taxes, and they're criminals, all kinds of people that are coming in unvetted. That is the problem. But now you know, and I know, and all your listeners know this, that many companies don't want to pay the required $16 an hour
Right.
that the Department of Labor puts on them. So they'd rather hire illegal aliens at $7 an hour, and then they drive wages down. I've heard horror stories from landscape customers that my brother has told me about that, for example, they call us and say, hey, I know y'all bid for this job and we didn't give it to you guys, but now we want to hire you. So, yeah, can we ask why? And they said, well, it's because the people that came here did a horrible job. And then there's an instance where there was one worker from that company where their daughter was swimming in the pool and he was behind the bushes masturbating. And I'm sorry to bring up that kind of example, but that's what's happening when you have unvetted people and you're hiring, or companies are hiring them, and then you put Americans in danger. So that's another con to illegal. I mean, but in order for this to work, for the H2As and H2Bs and the H1Bs to work, is that every American needs to be pro-American. And that's not going to happen, unfortunately, Mary, because some companies and corporations are greedy and they want to hire somebody at $80,000 a job for doing a research, scientific research. These are doctors and master's students or engineers. You can't pay them $75,000 or $60,000. You need to pay a good wage to those skilled, educated people.
Right.
But some, and that's, I can understand our side. And again, I'm one of those hawks that feel that people are not going to abide by the rules and then just cheat. And then we have the bastardization of this beautiful program. And it really is a beautiful program because it was engineered by the Immigration and Nationality Act to help us with work shortages and to help us to cherry pick the greatest and brightest minds, even for unskilled workers, because some of these unskilled workers that we get with these H2B visas and H2As are great workers that do an efficient job, and we can thank them for $1.25 a pound for cucumbers. Otherwise we're paying astronomical California rates, I guess. I don't know, but we don't think about the prices at the market, and we have those people that fill in the shortages to thank for that. But by the same token, I get so angry at these un-American people that are out there hiring people illegally, or hiring utilizing that program so they don't have to hire Americans, and that's not right. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place, Mary. I mean, I tried to explain the best I could in a neutral way the pros and cons of it, but I'll tell you right now, I'm against it. I'm against H1Bs for the simple fact that I know that it's going to be violated. Now, if we can somehow hold people accountable and to follow the rule of the law and punish those companies and corporations that don't abide by it, and with sanctions or kicking them out of the program, so they don't bring in those people, then that would be a good thing. There's got to be accountability.
Right.
But here's the problem, Mary, that you know that right now we have an immigration crisis simply because nobody follows by the rules, by the laws that are in the books. And we've discussed this in your program before. Nobody follows the Constitution, and there's no accountability ever. There's no fines. There's no sanctions. There's no employment sanctions. There's nothing. That's why we have illegal immigration, because, hey, everybody starts saying, well, why should I follow by the books? And my brother, for example, pays thousands and thousands of dollars to bring in visa workers. To be a part of this program, you got to pay all this money and assure and put in the ads in the paper. You got to follow all these rules. So why do all that when you can just hire Juan Fulano de Tal off the street, who's here illegally, for $7.50? And guess what? I mean, and that way everyone loses. Everyone loses, Mary, because the American loses because they're not getting tax. There's no taxes being paid by the illegal alien. There's no Social Security being paid into the system by them. All the money that they make, there's like 20 of them living in an apartment. 20 illegal aliens living in an apartment so they can save money. And what little money they save, they send it down south. They're not invested in America. They are invested in a certain sense where they're buying groceries and paying some slumlord, or they're some people are benefiting, but not Americans the way they could be. And
Right.
under these programs, guess what? They're sending money home so that that country is benefiting, but we're also keeping bright minds here, and we're seeing lower prices at the market, and wages are still high. Because if I have to pay, for example, my brother who's paying $20 an hour, he'll pay $20 an hour to somebody off the streets here in America who is an American citizen. Those are fair wages. We keep the wages up. Now, for hiring illegal aliens, guess what? A landscaping company full of illegal aliens will always outbid my brother, who has to pay insurance, who has to pay overhead for his company, who has to pay workman's comp. He's got to pay all of these things. Well, then guess what? They're always going to outbid us. And that's just fair.
No, it's not. And you're right. But once again, you have educated us. You've done a great job of speaking from your area of expertise in immigration law straight out of the Constitution. And I thank you for that. You've explained the reasons behind these. And that's a big part of understanding, how they work and why they were created. And that's very important. And I appreciate you explaining and educating our audience. So is there anything you'd like to add as we close today?
Well, I just hope that people understand. I mean, if they read my book, they understand that I'm a hawk when it comes to immigration issues. But we just got to be smart on our side to not cannibalize ourselves out there like the MAGA movement is doing right now. They're fighting over things they just don't know. I ask our side to please educate yourself. Educate yourself, and don't be such a nativist that you don't see that there is a reason why this program was started. And by the same token, don't be so naive if you're for the H-1B visas where you say, oh, we need them, this and that, just so because, for example, you benefit, Google benefits these tycoons benefit by keeping those workers here. Let's think about our country. Let's think about there is nothing more important than taking care of one another, and by doing that, by following by the rules, we and everyone does it. We keep illegal immigration down. If we increase visas, let's say we need more visas for low skilled workers, then we don't need so many low skilled workers coming across illegally. And guess what? If they can't find a job, they head back. Wouldn't that be great? That would be a great utopian society if we all followed by the rules, and illegal aliens would be eliminated by the sheer fact that we don't need them. But since people are taking shortcuts and cheating, we're always going to need them. Let's educate ourselves on this program, and all follow by the rules and take care of Americans first. I want my son, the engineer, to have a great job because he worked very hard and he did something that I would never be able to do. I don't know. I've never been good at math, Mary. That's why I'm here talking about immigration issues with you. But he can do it, and he should be rewarded for it, for getting a degree in engineering, and he'd make a great hand for somebody out there. But let's give them a chance first.
Absolutely. Once again, Joel, thank you. You have been a wealth of information and education, and thank you for coming on with us. We appreciate you and look forward to having you back again soon. Take care. God bless.